We're joined right now in studio with Congressman Tom Cotton. Congressman, thanks for coming in.
Good morning, Alice. It's great to be here. So I am leading the top of the first hour, and Senator Bozeman and Congressman Womack are at the bottom of the second hour.
That's right. You're the leadoff batter.
Is that a reflection of how eager your audience is to hear me, or their willingness to wake up early to come to the studio?
It's a reflection of your graciousness to get up early. I think it's your military background. You are fine with this hour.
True.
And we appreciate it. Well, there's a lot going on in Arkansas. Of course, in terms of the state session, the legislative session, a done deal for now. They just have to wrap things up in mid-May. But you can't go anywhere without news of the Boston bombing situation taking the headlines. And you are on the Foreign Affairs Committee as well as Financial Services. And with your military background and the Foreign Affairs Committee, this is something that's a big focus for you. And one of the concerns is the fact that the suspect that is now being treated in the hospital has been Mirandized, and which means there's no further investigation of him at this time. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it was a short-sighted decision, and it shows the failures of the Obama administration's counterterrorism policy not to interrogate a suspect. Well, I wouldn't say he's a suspect. We know that he was a bomber fully. This is not a matter where they need a criminal confession for a conviction. I think there's more than enough evidence to convict him ultimately of a crime in federal court. This is an active and open terrorism investigation. And the fact that he immediately stopped speaking once he received his Miranda warnings explains why we can't treat terrorists always in a law enforcement construct. We have to treat them in a law of war construct. So I worry that leads that our counterintelligence officials might otherwise be able to get from him and stop future bombings or track down accomplices or intercept supporters overseas are now going to be lost.
And you have said that you don't believe he should be tried as an enemy combatant, but this critical time right now to gather this information, it's very important not to Mirandize him, which means obviously you have the right to remain silent. This is a critical information gathering period.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's enough evidence yet to determine once and for all whether he should be held as an enemy combatant or as a common criminal. Jose Padilla, who was captured in 2002, who was attempted to detonate a radiological or dirty bomb in Chicago, was held in the criminal system for about a month before he was transferred to a military brig and held as an enemy combatant. That's a separate question from whether he should be tried before a military commission. Federal law currently prohibits an American citizen from being tried in a military commission, so that would not happen with the younger brother, but it doesn't prevent him from being held as an enemy combatant if he has in fact made war on the United States. And the main point of that is to try to interrogate him and exploit all his knowledge for full counterintelligence purposes. And I don't think there's enough evidence yet to determine that, but that's one reason why they need to keep interrogating him without Miranda warnings.
Right. My guest is Congressman Tom Cotton, and being on the Foreign Affairs Committee, you're getting a lot of intel, and certainly you can only discuss what is in open source documents and what is out there, but have there been any updates in the last 24 hours that we need to know about? Is there concerns that this is just going to open up the floodgates? Do we have this contained? What are you hearing?
I think you can see from much of the open source reporting that the more the FBI digs into, especially the older brother and his ties overseas, you see that these are not lone wolves. They were not just guys that decided to commit a crime. They probably received some kind of advanced training. The bombs that they used are the kind of advanced IEDs that I saw in Iraq or Afghanistan. They lived a lifestyle that seems to be beyond their means in both the Boston area and in terms of traveling overseas and their associations, whether they are in person overseas or electronic. So every day it appears, as we dig more deeply, that there are ties to terrorist organizations.
So does that give you concern? Do you think we've got this a handle on this, or do we think this is the first of more?
No, I think there's many threads to unravel in the Zarnoff brothers attacks. They were obviously, we now know, planning another round of attacks in New York and might have executed that if not for the happenstance of being spotted last Thursday night at a local convenience store. And we don't know if they could have potential sympathizers or allies elsewhere in the United States who have received the same kind of training and have the same kind of support from overseas organizations, which is why it's so important that the FBI and our counterintelligence professionals continue to interrogate thoroughly without interferences from law enforcement, prosecutors, or judges.
Or the U.S. Attorney. Yeah, right. My guest is Congressman Tom Cotton. You also sit on the Financial Services Committee here in Washington, and one of the big issues deals with the sequester funds.
Right.
And none of this really pertains to anyone until it affects you.
Yeah.
And yesterday, when I was flying here to D.C., flight was delayed, and they said over the loudspeaker, it's the FAA's responsibility, or this is a result of the FAA cutbacks. And what are you hearing in terms of how that will be fixed? I understand the Senate has authorized funds from the FAA to be shifted to air traffic control. We're seeing delays at airports across the country, typically the busier airports.
Right.
And the FAA says there's just not enough to fund all the air traffic controllers needed.
Right. The delays at airports, in my opinion, are a deliberate strategy by the Obama administration telling the American flying public, you will sit on the tarmac until you agree to cough up more tax revenue for our big government spending programs. The FAA faced an only 4% budget cut, yet they chose to cut 10% out of their air traffic controllers' man hours. The FAA as a whole had a $15.3 billion budget after the sequester. The president's own requested budget for this year was only $15.2 billion. So they actually did not receive a real cut whatsoever. I think this is a deliberate strategy, as I said, to try to sensationally grab headlines and inflict maximum pain on the American people. Fortunately, the Senate has said that they're not going to let the Obama administration engage in this kind of action, and they passed last night unanimously a measure that would allow the FAA to shift money from longer-term capital spending accounts to the air traffic control operations account. It wouldn't increase the budget, or it wouldn't therefore increase the deficit. It would simply shift funds within the FAA, and I suspect the House will take up that legislation today, and that would remove the Obama administration's only pretext for furloughing these air traffic controllers and hopefully get our air traffic system back on schedule.
So if that's the case, what does the FAA gain out of doing this? Just more money?
No, they won't get any more money in their top-line revenue. What will happen is money is moved from accounts that would have been spent on, say, capital improvements, upgrades to towers, or investment, kind of like investments that you might make in your own business for expanding a factory, and will be shifted to short-term operations accounts so they can continue to pay all air traffic controllers to work normal work weeks. So kind of like shifting your money from, as I said, investing in capital expansion of your factory into today's labor rates.
And one thing they stress, and airline officials stress, is this doesn't affect the safety. It's just will require delays and longer waits at the airports. Yes.
So it's again, I think, like I said, it's an attempt by the Obama administration to extract more tax revenue from the American people. In February, as these spending cuts were looming, he went around the country saying that prisoners are going to be rampaging through the streets because we can't pay prison guards, and planes are going to be crashing in the sky because we can't pay air traffic controllers, and meat's going to be rotting in the factories because we can't pay meat inspectors, and none of those things had really come to pass. So the FAA, without any real notice or warning, sprung this on the American flying public as well as the airlines last week, when they had 18 months to prepare for a more reasonable sequester plan that would not have impacted the American people so dramatically.
Yeah. So all the concerns about the sky is falling. Now the skies are being affected by the sequester cuts.
And I think the president's strategy obviously has failed. The Senate, both Democrats and Republicans, have said we're not going to let the president play these kind of games with the American people when the FAA has more than enough money to fund its full air traffic operations. So we're going to shift that money away from the one account and shift it into the air traffic account and force the FAA to provide the services that they exist to provide for the American people. Well,
good. Hopefully that money gets shifted and things get moving along quickly. We're going to take a quick break. It is 6:17. We're joined with Congressman Tom Cotton. We'll be back to talk about a few things going on in Arkansas.